Welcome to another Upper Peninsula Environmental Coalition live stream. I'm your host, Evan Zimmerman, here with my co-host, Horst Schmidt, as always. As the longest-serving environmental organization in Michigan's UP, the Upper Peninsula Environmental Coalition strives to preserve and enhance the unique cultural and natural resources of the Upper Peninsula through public education, the promotion of sound land stewardship, science-based decisions and policies, and reasoned dialogue with communities, governments, industries, and others with whom we share this land. The Upper Peninsula Environmental Coalition recognizes the tribal nations of this territory. We acknowledge that we stand upon the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe. In doing so, we seek to heal traumas inflicted by an ongoing history of colonization and correct intergenerational justice. And our guest tonight is UPEC's own Kathleen Heideman with part one of UP mining threats, taking it personally. Horst, would you like to introduce Kathleen?
Hey, thank you. I want to mention that we started doing this as members of the board realized the threat of the mining that's occurred and there's been an uptick recently in terms of attempting to get mine going in next to the Parkies, and then there's exploration going on in Marquette and Baraga County, and so we're really concerned. And part of our problem is that we feel it's a threat because not only do they, you know, threaten the environment once they get started digging, but also because of all the propaganda that comes out of all of this. And we hear things like critical minerals, and an attempt to lure people into believing that if we don't do this, life is going to go downhill, whereas the exact opposite is true. If we do too much of this mining, then life will go downhill. So anyway, I thought that we would get Kathleen Heideman, our longtime board member and mining expert extraordinaire, to speak not only tonight, but also two more times in February and March, both at the third Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So we want to, emphasize the importance of what has happened historically, which is still being cleaned up in the UP, and also what the dangers are with the new era of mining, and also the desire on the part of the companies to somehow or other sway people to think that this is the only route to go. So Kathleen, I really appreciate you taking the time to come tonight and to tell us about Tilden, which is in Marquette County, and what has gone on there, and then we'll be seeing you in the next 2 months as well. So the floor is yours.
Testing, testing, testing. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. And as Horst says, he got me to do 3 sessions spread out over 3 months, which is sort of funny since I did all of this information in one fell swoop back in December. So I am just going to talk about the Tilden project tonight, but Horst asked me to mention at the beginning that there is a company, a new company, Perseverance Metals, that nobody knows anything about really yet. They're not publicly traded. They're applying probably for public traded status. They're raising money, as all these Canadian companies do, and they have applied for public land mineral leases in the UP. So they have recently acquired the Voyager lands, which is a very large land package in the central UP, directly below the Keweenaw. sort of stretching all the way down to the Wisconsin border. And it's another hodgepodge of historic mineral ownership. But I encourage everybody to pay attention to that one. We'll be talking about it in the future and probably encouraging everyone to join public comments. So thanks so much. Tonight we're talking about Tilden because Tilden Mine has resubmitted a application for a wetland permit. And we've had 3 years of this now, so we know their permit as well as they do, I think. Whoop, sorry. So are my slides showing properly, Evan?
Yes, they are. Thank you.
Thumbs up. Great. Okay. So this one, I just wanted to share some context before we go leaping into Tilden Mine. Let's talk a little bit about the historic period in Marquette County. Our group has not historically dealt with iron mining. I came from Save the Wall GP background, and we started with sulfide mining from the beginning with Eagle Mine. And this is where it all began in Marquette County in terms of the iron being discovered in Negaunee and Jackson Mine. They dug a pit and then they continued underground from there. And so the landscape goes from open pit to a smattering of head frames and shafts. Hundreds of mines were put into Marquette County in a very short period. And the landscape, as you can see, was, immediately devastated in terms of, trees cut down and the every inch of Negaunee and Marquette County, Ishpeming, in the central Iron Range was turned over several times. So this is getting closer to the area that is now Empire and Tilden. This is Volunteer Mine, which was actually down in Palmer. Amazing shot showing one of their early blasts in a big open pit down there. And this is what was left behind in the UP. All the logging had to happen for all those trestles and all of the underground supports for the mines and all the railroads, and everything was made out of wood. We sent our wood everywhere. And then the next thing that happened was erosion. So with deforestation, we had an amazing amount of topsoil loss, which impacted waters historically. So we're still recovering from that period. And I promised to do a little poetry tonight. And the title of my talk tonight is Taking It Personally. And I'm trying to explain that I think, right now I know a lot of people who are feeling a little overwhelmed with politics and environmental issues and the work that has to be done and the angst of addressing all of the problems of the world, especially environmental. And I think that taking it personally and finding your own personal connections to these issues, you can inhabit the work more fully. You can bring your entire spirit to it and not feel like it's a distraction from the things that you should be doing, right? But own it fully. And so this is taking it personally for me. I worked for many years researching the history of iron mining in the Marquette iron mining towns of Negaunee and Ishpeming. I was particularly fascinated by the mines, what happened underground, as well as the subsidence that happened after the mining caused cave-ins. And so the stories that I collected have become a volume of poetry that's coming out in the next few months. So right now I'm kind of torn between, the technical comment writing on permits and thinking about the work that I have done more creatively on this. So I'm just going to read you a short excerpt. This is something that this man, Raleigh, shared with me when I interviewed him in 1997. He said, "Let me show you this. Between Negaunee and Palmer, That's where I was born. He shows me a small photo pointing with a blackened fingernail. Bellevue. Now that was a beautiful farm, he says. You see that barn? Just huge, my lord, built in a great X. The center was like a cathedral inside. In the distance, you can see the dots, the dipping tanks. The farm raised sheep and potatoes and vegetables for the company. Most beautiful farm you ever saw. When the mine stopped using the barn for sheep, they turned it into 4 houses. 4 families lived there. We lived there. They turned our property into the big field. Potatoes and vegetables. The mine owned our land. The mine took our crops. Now let me tell you one more thing about my home. That whole field is buried under a mountain of waste rock now. Well, maybe the big field is still there. Maybe a bit of it. A bit was visible the last time I checked, but that must be 10 years or so. That stockpile keeps growing. The rocks keep sliding down, so odds are against it. The big field was beautiful. Grew potatoes like you wouldn't believe. Big fields gone forever now. Buried, I guess. So that brings us to what was burying the big field, and that's Tilden and Empire Mine. I'm going to be talking specifically about Tilden, but they're really one big organism. So you should pronounce it Tilden Empire or Empire Tilden. It's just one thing. And so historic extraction, here are some images showing, the views of it taken from different perspectives aerially. It's hard to understand this, even if you're flying over, everything seems to flatten out. I've flown over it in a helicopter and a small plane, getting shots. These were not taken by me. This was someone else in our group. This I took. This is the waste rock that's been pulverized, and the liquid is containing iron waste that is as small as like baby powder. So this is one of their tailing basins, and in the background you can see the piles of waste rock. So the other aspect to the historic period is that we have historic extraction scars that are visible from space. The one on the right is the historic tailing basins of the White Pine Mine, and that is a satellite view. And then the one on the left is, of course, the Empire Tilden complex with the settling basins directly down from Tilden. And that blood red color is it's not really that dramatic. It's part of the color correction that the satellite images do. But the astronauts report seeing this as they go by. They frequently comment on the Empire Tilden project from the space station. They can see it. So here is where we're at in terms of these mines. You can see the Empire and Tilden is at the bottom of this picture, Empire and Tilden Mines, it says. And this is a map that was put out by Glyphwick. So I'm just going to zoom into this a little more, looking just at the resources geologically. Most of our mining impacts and threats are in the central and western UP. So we have on one side the Copperwood and the White Pine North impacts, historic White Pine and pending Copperwood. We have, this is where the Perseverance metals Voyager lands are that I mentioned at the beginning. We have Talon, Michigan nickel properties, previously Sweetwater, UPEC, Rio Tinto, and that whole land package is colored in green there. We have Lundin, Eagle Mine, and Humboldt Mill, and and the Eagle Block out there, the pink area around Eagle Mine, of properties that they kept when they passed along their property to UPEC, all the Rio Tinto lands that were previously shown in green there. And then here is the Empire and the Tilden Mine at the heart of Marquette County in the Iron Range. So just to give you a sense of where all these things I'm talking about are, also we have Keweenaw Land Association sort of spread out. They don't have any surface anymore, just minerals. And then we also have the Gold Resources Back 40 project at the bottom. So, all right, just in terms of the Humboldt Mill, just in terms of the Empire and Tilden iron mines, this picture shows you a red line, a kind of burgundy red line that goes through the entire map here. And I just wanted to point this out. This is the treaty line. So the Empire and Tilden kind of straddles the treaty line. And so some of the impacts are actually in one side of the treaty, and some of their impacts are in the other side of the treaty. So we have the Treaty of 1836 tribes that are impacted by this, as well as resources under the Treaty of 1842. In terms of Tilden mining, we saw a wetland permit last year, which they applied late in the year. So they applied in 2023. We looked at it last spring, and there was, I'm very proud to say, an enormous outpouring of concern. We rallied a lot of comments. We heard eventually through the grapevine that these were some of the best comments that the Water Resources Division had ever received on a permit. And I'm really proud of the technical comments that people wrote. I appreciate all of the heartfelt comments as well, but I really think that people on the environmental concerns side are mastering the language of caring about these things, in speaking the language that the regulators can hear and understand and respond to. So this is the past permit again. I'm just setting the stage for the new one. In 2024, they wanted to bury 300 acres of their total impact area included streams. 79 of those acres were wetlands. So they wanted to push this stockpile that you see further to the west. And we pushed back. The application revealed they had no understanding of the history of the area. I can't tell you how bad some aspects of the application were. So they did not mention any of the history of the creek that they were proposing to impact, the specific land that was their impacted area. This is terrain that was mapped and studied extensively starting in the 1850s, and continues to be a really important resource because it has mapped images of the extent of beaver dams that were sort of like, the most amazing beaver dam complexes in North America that have been recorded. And so they didn't mention it at all. And I'll say, incidentally, they still don't mention it. They just resubmitted their permit and it's not mentioned. The cumulative impacts to wildlife in their 2024 application, they say crazy things like wildlife species are adapting to localized impacts in the mine project areas, apparently buffered by the extensive amount of quality habitat in the watershed. No evidence to indicate that proposed projects and future impacts will change these trends. They claim that these animals are adapting to localized impacts, but they didn't do a mammal or a bird survey. and they didn't know the key species that were in the Ely Creek corridor. So they didn't actually know what they were saying, I don't think. And it's important to note that the Empire and Tilden mines together have formed an industrial wasteland that covers 25 square miles now in the center of Marquette County. So you'd expect that there'd be an incredible environmental impact assessment report for that whole area, but in fact, they're using still an environmental impact assessment that they wrote, one of their contractors, back in 1999. They pulled this together and published it in 2000. And then last time they didn't include it, so we were forced to FOIA for it. And they wanted us to pay to see the environmental impact assessment. It's really not worth paying for that impact assessment. They haven't included it now. And it's incredibly bad and flawed in some significant ways. I think we need to tell them to update it. And the EPA should be telling them to update it, actually. So their application last time was flawed because significantly they used a bad alternatives analysis process. They failed to consider cumulative impacts. They failed to conduct a biological survey for the northern long-eared bat. And then they missed threatened and endangered species. This in the red just shows some of the impacts to wetlands that they would have been hitting with the previous permit application. So we'll get into a little bit more of this, but what is the solution when you get a really bad permit? Under the law, we are able to propose our own suggest our own feasible alternatives since they failed to suggest some good feasible alternatives. And some of that got attention. Glyphwick did an amazing job suggesting feasible alternatives. Their report reads like a novel. And then I'm proud to say we did a lot on feasible alternatives as well. And in the end, it looked like the company would not be able to get an approved permit. EPA and the Fish and Wildlife Service had some objections that could not be resolved, and the applicant withdrew. The red areas here are areas that we were suggesting they look at for alternative areas around where they're proposing to put the waste rock. So this is the old proposal from 2024. This is their preferred alternative. And so you can see up here in the corner, this is a lake. And you can see how close the stockpile already is to the lake. Underneath here, so right where my cursor is, this is the existing stockpile. And they were going to bring it up closer to Ely Creek and the wetlands. And hit all sorts of wetlands in here, as well as have like a mile of stream impacts. And this would be buried, not a temporary impact. And then here you can see the same image. It sort of makes it clear the wetlands that are underneath, that would have been hit. The funny thing is, this is actually from their new application. So one of the problems is they've got their map screwed up. And so in the new application, they're using this old boundary map. And so, they're making things harder for themselves. They have included some additional areas, but they're using an old map in the new application. And, that's just confusing for the regulators, honestly, I think. This is the historical review of this area that they failed to notice when they're doing their cultural and literature review. So they still haven't mentioned it. They have Bar Engineering from Minnesota, based in Minnesota, that did their cultural resources assessment and their literature review. And they still don't mention this. They've updated the cultural assessment. They did a phase 1 update, but they didn't mention any of the actual literature that would affect the area they're planning on impacting with their proposed stockpile expansion. This is a print from that historical view of the exact spot, Grass Lake, that those red arrows in the previous slides have been pointing to. And again, they're unaware of this apparently. Here's a historical picture showing Grass Lake, probably taken from the spot, where the waste rock piles are now. Grass Lake has been documented in terms of its history for, 175 years now, as long as the mining activity has been happening, and the history of beavers and the resiliency of the beaver landscape is really important to a lot of researchers. This is just a drawing showing the big beaver dam at Grass Lake. In the foreground, you can see it was just a massive dam created by beavers on Grass Lake historically. So also in that area were wolves. And they said, in their review last time, was there any potential impact to wolves? No. Were there any wolves in the area? No. So they were unaware of wolves. This is just a picture that an adjacent landowner had taken. So here is the new wetland permit application. I was a little worried at first that I had, blacked out over the holiday period and missed like a big permit public notice or something, because there were so many files. But the truth is that their current status is incomplete application. They have not made it through the hurdles. They were submitting files way back at the beginning of December, but they were missing some key things. And right now the status is incomplete, and they had 30 days. They were notified that it was incomplete on the 20th. So they have 30 days from the 20th. Otherwise, their application is considered rescinded. That's counting. I think that's 3 days from now. I hope they don't get their act together shortly. Here's the law, the regulations under which the state of Michigan is regulating wetlands. My focus is on the wetlands. So Michigan has delegated authority for wetlands. We need to understand what that means. It means that the state of Michigan is one of the just a couple states that has federal delegated authority for wetland permitting. But this is a red file. This permit is such a big wetland impact that the EPA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are always sort of looking over the state's shoulder and commenting on it. I mean, they can do that on other permits, but the first one was almost 80 acres, and now this one is smaller than that, but still significant. So, Part 303, wetland protection. Except with a permit, you can't do any of these things, which are the things that this company wants to do. They want to deposit fill in a wetland. They want to dredge material from a wetland. They want to construct, have other uses in wetlands. They want to drain surface water from wetlands. So in order to get that permit to do those things, you have to prove certain things. And so first, you should note that the applicant shall bear the burden of demonstrating that an unacceptable disruption to aquatic resources will not occur. And, unfortunately, the applicant bears the responsibility, but it seems to also fall to environmental groups to point it out and to constantly raise those concerns. Left to their own devices, these permits just sort of slide through. So the applicant needs to demonstrate either of the following: either that the proposed activity is primarily dependent upon being located in wetland, or that there are no feasible and prudent alternatives. And so the first, A, that's only true if it's like a peat farm or a blueberry farm. Not very common. So B is true here. There are no feasible or prudent alternatives. That's what the company is saying, right? We have to dump this waste rock in these wetlands because there's no feasible and prudent alternative. And the feasible and prudent alternative has to be proven by the material that they submit. And so the applicant shall not so narrowly define the purpose of their project so as to limit a complete analysis of whether the activity is dependent on being in a wetland or whether there are feasible and prudent alternatives. So I think, that's the bugaboo that we keep finding is they don't do enough feasible and prudent alternatives. And the feasible and alternative provision applies if the alternative is available, capable of being done after taking into consideration cost, technology, and logistics, and if the alternative would have less adverse impact on aquatic resources. They could use for their feasible prudent alternative a different location, a different size, a different configuration, a different method to achieve the purpose. And then they have to show that a feasible and prudent alternative that could have involved a different location, like non-wetland. It is presumed that a different location without a wetland in it would have less adverse impact on aquatic resources than the wetland location. And again, they just narrowly limit what their feasible alternatives are. So that was the big important thing last time, was pointing out some of the feasible alternatives that they had not considered. A feasible alternative could be prudent even if it does not accommodate the components of the proposed activity that are incidental to or severable from the proposed activity, or if it entails higher costs or reduced profit. So the department makes that decision, but it could involve land that's not even owned by the company at the current moment. So, it's just, there's a lot of possibility there, and the companies tend to gloss over it. Their feasible alternatives reviews should be a lot more comprehensive. So they determine what they want to do, and then they make the feasible alternative sort of fit it. Michigan has a goal of no net loss, but wetland losses continue. We've lost half the wetlands in the state of Michigan over time, but it's not evenly distributed. Even up here, we think we're blessed with wetlands everywhere we look, but Schweitzer Creek, the subunit of the Escanaba River, very close to the Tilden project, has lost 41% since the beginning of Tilden mine. So again, here's the location. You can see Lake Sally in almost all the images that I show you. Lake Sally has not been filled in. The lake right next to it has been partially filled in. And can anybody see a dividing line there between the Empire side and the Tilden side? Right? There's no dividing line. There's an imaginary property dividing line, but there's no physical line dividing the two. It's one giant complex. And they're pumping their waste all the way over here and down here. So it's a very large facility. This is an overhead view. So again, here you see Lake Sally where my cursor is, and here you see Grass Lake up in this corner. So the impacts are here historically. So here I'd like you to note the ghost lakes. There are ghost lakes underneath. This is an image that they included in their portfolio of environmental impact assessment information. If you look here, there's a lake underneath the Tilden stockpile. If you look over here, there's a lake underneath part of their pit. Here's a lake underneath another pit. Here's a lake underneath here. So all of these lakes have been destroyed in the time that Tilden has been operating. They're gone. And similarly, this is from their historic environmental impact assessment. This is showing ghost wetlands. These wetlands under the red area are lost, which is partly why we need to take future encroachment into wetlands extremely seriously. I mean, this company has a long history of filling in wetlands and filling in lakes as they deem necessary. On this side of the map, you can see Ely Creek comes out of Lake Sally, goes through Grassy Lake. There are beaver dams all over in here, and then it flows over to the far left-hand side of the image and down to join Escanaba eventually. So location of the Tilden Mine stockpile expansion. Again, I'm pointing up here to the spot with Grassy Lake. And originally they were planning, you can sort of see the shadow of an old power line here. That power line boundary, that's pretty much the area that they were proposing to cover with waste rock. They were going to push this whole stockpile out this far. I actually, no, it would gone past that. It actually came up as far as this line. So they had about 5 different alternatives. And the big one that is not avoided in any of them is this spot right here. This is Tilden Pond, and that is a beaver pond that's been documented all the way back to Morgan in the 1850s. And that beaver pond complex goes over here and feeds into Ely Creek as part of the Escanaba River. So this is the location of what they're proposing. Here's the pit right here. They want to keep digging the pit, expand the pit, pile all of the waste rock higher and further. They wanted to put it out here because that gets it out of their way. Basically, that's the long and short of it. They pile the waste rock at the outsides of their site and leave the pits at the middle. They can't go here, they say, because of the Tilden processing plant, the pellet plant. And then they say that they can't go over here because that's Empire's. But all of that is owned by the same company now. The entire processing mines, the basins, everything is Cleveland Cliffs. And so in the past, there was a lot of different ownership, but it's pretty consolidated now. There are a lot of differences in terms of small parts of titles and royalties and all that, but it is the same owner. And, they've arbitrarily just ignored the east side in terms of a place that they could put their waste rock. This shows their revised plans for the Tilden Mine expansion as of the permit that we are looking at right now. This is from Figure 4 in their alternatives analysis. And to the degree that I can claim that we have succeeded and made a difference environmentally, look at this, right? All of these areas that were previously going to be covered with waste rock are not proposed to be covered with waste rock. Their proposed alternative is to move slightly east here. These are areas that have already been mined out. Some of them are pits. They're going to fill the pits and make the top of the stockpile kind of into a giant mesa. Here we had proposed this TFWB, that's the far west stockpile. And this is something that Glyphwick and the Mining Action Group pointed out to them and said, look, you guys have this stockpile right here. You can make it taller. You can make a bridge kind of between these two that could allow you to bring ore to the top level on both of them. If you're already sacrificing this area under all of the possible alternatives, then it should just be a solid area. They were keeping this open because they have a road that goes out. Their main road into the facility at National Mine is on that side. So it looks like they're listening to some degree, and the impacts to wetlands have been reduced as a result. So the wetland impacts here are still being hit right in this pocket in the corner. That seems to be the most unavoidable part. They had to do a wetland inventory over on this side as well because their stockpile is going to go on this side. But this whole area between Empire and Tilden is already planned to be mined out and pushed northward as far as the plan that was outlined in Empire's future before Empire did a closure. So here is the previous map showed the overview map for the wetland impacts in this one, but I would say that the wetland overview map is not, the overview maps are not as good in this one because they've previously applied for this permit 3 times. This is the third time. They are just kind of adding supplemental files each time, and it makes it very difficult to go back and see the wetland delineation files for each impacted area. But they are planning on filling more than 1 acre of wetlands. They are going to impact all types of wetlands, emergent, forested, and scrub shrub. And altogether, their impacts now in the preferred plan come to 32.5, which is still enormous by national standards. And so there's still reason to be concerned about this permit. Here is where they're planning on mitigating their wetland impacts. You'd think that this is the area that needs wetland mitigation, but they're proposing to mitigate over at the Republic Wetland Mitigation Bank, which is also owned by Cleveland Cliffs and was set up with the specific purpose of mitigating future expansion of Tilden and Empire. And the problem is, this is an old iron mine over on this side, and those wetlands, to the degree that they're, created or fixed, remediated, were fixed and remediated to undo previous damages by the same company. So it's sort of a double dipping to use those for mitigation for a new mine expansion. So the ratios appear to be accurate, when you look at the compensation plan, but those Republic wetlands were created on top of literally tailing ponds. So they're not functioning the same way a beaver pond that has still got beavers, and has been historically functioning as a beaver pond for 1,000 years is functioning, right? And also when you zoom in, this is the Republic wetland complex. When you zoom in, what you can see is that red staining, right? They call it red staining. It's not red staining. It's sediment transport from the tailing basins that are underneath these wetlands, right? So that's iron sediment, the same as that red pools of red that I showed you at the very beginning of the slideshow. It's just buried underneath the wetlands that have been slowly recovering here. Also, the wetland complex plan for the Republic is really, it's complicated, and Glyphwick seems to think, their review shows that the company is claiming wetlands that were just naturally in the area that were never actually destroyed by the iron mining at Republic. They're claiming those as part of their wetland mitigation bank. They didn't create them. They didn't preserve them. They didn't fix them. They're just claiming them as wetlands that are available for compensating damage over in Empire and Tilden. So that's problematic. And so here's a map showing kind of the complexity of the tailings system over at Republic. And you can see way down here at the bottom, they get close to other lakes. And then there's streams. That's where they say they're going to fix the stream. There's going to be some channel impacts and stuff. This is an old tailing basins, and this is reuse water basins. So this is the area that's still seeping red, and this is part of what they're saying that they're going to claim as wetland mitigation for this project. So that bears more looking at. Here is their proposal: forested and scrub shrub and emergent. And so the numbers come out, but it isn't clear that the mitigation agreement is proper, or that kind of bank is the best way to mitigate those losses. First, we have to ask ourselves, when we look at this new permit, is Tilden's review of the feasible alternatives adequate? So the last time it was completely inadequate. This year, the new review seems to include some of these areas way over here on the northeast side. This is, part of the Empire Mine Complex. So I'm glad that they're including these. This is the Empire side again. So Empire, this is Charlotte Pit. This is C, D, and 1 and 2. So these areas in here that they're considering, they say are too far away to include. So they consider them, but then they dismiss them. And to some degree, my suspicion is that they choose these things that are specifically so far away that they can immediately dismiss them as, not feasible alternatives. Because then they can say that they made a whole list of feasible alternatives to review, right? I think that their feasible alternatives in the current application is better than this. This shows, this black line here, that they're going to go way up towards Ely Creek and Grass Lake, and then way over here over to this side of the stockpile. Right now, the new plan is to reuse some of these red, green, and blue areas over here, make them taller, make these areas taller, and push the stockpile kind of over into this pink and orange area rather than pushing it into the green area, right? So a brownfield use rather than a greenfield use, which is good. They claim that, they're penned in on all sides. Also, I'll just say that, this map here is coming from their current application, but it's all wrong. Like they have all kinds of inaccuracies on here because the preferred alternative is using the old outline. And so here, the 2025 Appendix C Cultural Resources file, they're still using the wrong boundary. This is the shape of the 2024 stockpile boundary. And then previously, they did not include the environmental impact assessment. And so I'm glad, I'll say thanks. I'm glad that they included it this time, so we didn't have to FOIA for it. They did include it as an image file. The entire file, which is 300 some pages, is pictures, so you can't search it. If anybody is interested, I've converted it to a searchable document because that's maddening. But basically, this non-searchable document was created in 2000 to answer questions that the EPA was having about cumulative impact assessment. Empire was going to expand and Tilden was going to expand, and people were starting to say, like, hey, wait, like, there's environmental laws now, and you have to like prove that you're not damaging water resources. Like, where is your environmental impact assessment for the history of this project that goes back to the 1850s, right? I mean, they've been mining in Marquette County, the same company, since the 1850s. So what they did was put together a hodgepodge of data in their EIA, and it includes data from different sources from the 1970s to the 1990s. I included this screen because I wanted you to notice over here, the green is supposed to show us the wetlands, okay? And you've seen multiple pictures now of this Lake Sally corridor over here. If you'll notice just the area that my cursor is pointing to, those are supposed to be the wetlands in that area in this environmental impact assessment. And, that is only a tiny portion of the wetlands in that area. So what was the source of this data for their wetlands? Well, over here you see that they were taking the wetland information from Landsat 91. Okay, what that means is they took some aerial imagery database from Landsat, satellite imagery of land cover. They got it from the DNR, as far as I can tell, which was using it for habitat imagery. They were trying to figure out, like, what is the land cover, what kind of trees are there, what kind of creatures would use it. And they used the Landsat data. Down here you can see black spruce, tamarack, wetlands. They're basically interpolating the land cover data to tell them whether or not there are wetlands there. So the Landsat imagery database was from 1991. that is the underlying assumption for all of their environmental impacts. They're using outdated imagery from 1991 to know where the impacts were in this historic land area, most of which is already covered, so the impacts have already been experienced. I mean, this area right here that says Tilden Mine has already lost 94 acres of lakes that have been buried. So it's hard to say that this is an adequate environmental impact. And one thing I would say is no matter whether we think it's a valid, least environmentally damaging practical alternative, we should tell the EPA this is a company that has 25 square miles of wasteland in the middle of Marquette County with huge water resource impacts, and we need them to do an updated environmental impact assessment for both projects, Empire and Tilden, shared ownership, shared impacts. So they're still impacting their permits. Their permit impacts are felt separately, right? This is for Tilden. If Empire wakes back up, they'll apply again for their impacts over on the other side. When really they've been changing the landscape here for 175 years. The environmental impact assessment is outdated. For the most part, it fails to mention the documented selenium and mercury contamination that comes from the stockpiles and the tailings. There is a question of environmental justice that's not really addressed in any of these permits. This is a cancer cluster, life expectancy lower kind of thing when you look at all of the little towns that are around Empire and Tilden. There is a residential drinking water well that's supposed to be a protected wellhead in National Mine, which is in the superficial aquifer underneath Ely Creek. And the permit doesn't seem to address that anew. That was something we raised last year. Ely Creek is a designated trout stream, and half the time they're referring to it as a warm water stream. 37 acres of wetland loss is still high nationally, even though they've, reduced it from about twice that last time. The beaver ponds of historic importance have not been entirely avoided and have not been mentioned in the new permit. And they confirmed what we told them last year, which was that there's an active bald eagle nest adjacent to their stockpile. And they finally did a walking tour with biologists last year and found it after we mentioned it multiple times in the public hearing. So, and then wolves in the corridor have not been addressed. And the new issue is the use of the wetland mitigation bank, and then the fact that there is no plan included for the stream mitigation. So because this was received in December, there are already some notes on the file, and I'll just share what the initial comments from the Water Resources Department reviewer are. First, they said that there's a math problem. They're adding up the stockpiles, saying that they need 473 million tons of storage, but there's only 451 million tons in the stockpiles that they selected. Then there's no sufficient detail for the economic analysis of the alternatives. The economic analysis of the rejected alternatives could have fewer water resources impacts, right? Specifically, and then they mentioned some of them. So please justify why these are not feasible, which is an important note. Here it says that Eagle has not confirmed that the proposed wetland mitigation meets the requirements of the mitigation rules. That's big. They haven't said that before. And it says that these concerns were previously communicated during our review of the prior application. So those were comments I was not aware of. That's good. I mean, I knew that EPA had said something like that, but this is Eagle saying it as well. And then they included the note on the bald eagles, and they didn't say whether they need any not disruption permit. I'm forgetting the term, but they may impact that bald eagle's nest, and they would need a permit to do so. And so here it says they're looking to see if there's additional comments from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service since last fall. And And whether, oh, and the top one is probably about bats having been added. There's new, the tricolor bat is proposed for endangered listing. And then in addition to this, they are saying that there are water quality impacts that were not addressed, proposed discharges to water quality. The proposed discharge is an issue that they skirt entirely in their applications. The EIA from back in 2000 says, you know, that the water quality is not going to be impacted by their proposal, and the water quality, things like hydrology are not impacted. That the water continues to flow from historic lakes that have been buried in rubble. That the water flows out and into Ely Creek and yada yada. So the maps show discharges, but they don't talk about the proposed discharge or how they're going to deal with the, you know, contamination from the discharges with their stockpiles. And then in addition, they are saying that the stockpile boundaries are incorrect, which is, you know, the main thing in this permit. So if you are interested in joining the party of people who are reading and reviewing this, the first thing to do is jot this URL down that I made, https short URL .at/YLIM5. It is hard to find files in the My site because there are, you know, multiple different listings for every mining company depending on different permits that they've applied for. But this is the mother lode. There's like 1,000 documents in this one, and you can see here that they're all dated, so you can see when they've been updated. And you can search for them here before they're going to appear in a public notice. Okay. And so this is the quick link to get the Tilden files. And if you can't find that, just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you as well. Okay. But you can select multiple, if you haven't used this system before, you select multiple files and then you download them, and it takes a long, because some of the files are really big, you might think that it's not working, but if you look, you'll see the little cursor spins while it's packaging them, and it ends up making a zip file that you download, you know, all of your files into one big zip folder and open them up. So take action, read the application. We've requested a public hearing, and we've requested an extension of the public comment period when it finally opens, because this is a big application. But I hope you'll join me in that. And on behalf of yourself or organizations that you work with, you know, contact Eagle and ask for greater time for public comment, time to speak and do a public hearing. I'd say face to face would be awesome, but you know, they haven't yielded to that since the pandemic. So, and then if you have any questions, the person who is reviewing this permit for the Water Resources Division is Kayla Conklin, and that's her email address, Conklin K3@michigan.gov. So take it personally. And I just, again, I say this, take it personally in the best possible way. So last year when we started this permit review process, and the adjacent landowner, well, I'll start at the beginning of that story. Basically, as we were reviewing the permit files last year, we noticed a statement that said there are no bald eagles in the project area, and no bald eagles have been seen in the project area, not even seen in the project area since the 1980s, which is preposterous. For any place in the UP, even a tailing basin gets eagle visits, you know, occasionally. So nobody's seen one, and there hasn't been one here for decades. So I just started searching for eagle photos locally, and I found an adjacent landowner who's been documenting eagles living on a nest adjacent to the stockpile for decades. And so this is how she takes it personally. which I find is just so beautiful, right? Like find the thing that you care passionately about. You know, these eagles don't get a message saying that the Tilden permit is up for review. You know, it's up to us to advocate on their behalf. They have been nesting here. They were nesting in this area in a different tree for probably, you know, many decades. And then the company decided to change the direction of the power lines, and the power line company came through and cut right up to the eagle nest. And after the ATC line went through, then the tree fell down in the first windstorm. And then they moved even closer to the stockpile. Right now, this nest is very, very, very close to the stockpile. And they fledged babies last year. And I'm so pleased that not just environmental groups, but individual landowners and tribes, I think right all together they had received comments on this permit last year from at least 7 tribes because it impacts both treaty areas. There were comments coming at them from all over the place. And Glyphwick wrote amazing comments, and environmental groups took it seriously as well. So anyway, I urge you all to take it personally and get involved and do it with a smile on behalf of the world that we love. Okay. And with that, I guess we just open to questions. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kathleen. I think it's a masterful job of trying to explain all the work that you've done and make it manageable for us to understand tonight. So I just wanted to mention that Jeffrey Lohman and then Jeff Towner have questions and comments. So Jeff Lohman, why don't you go ahead and start?
Thanks. Thank you, Kathleen. That was amazing. All 58 minutes of it. The I had a few thoughts, and I'm kind of wondering if the involvement of Glyphwick, maybe yourself, others, isn't just helping them obey the law, but they're violating the law. And the state of Michigan is not making them obey the law, obviously, or they'd be issuing notices of violation. And my recommendation is to petition EPA to withdraw Clean Water Act authority from the state of Michigan as a first step. I don't think you need any other reason than the fact that the state of Michigan doesn't have the same conflict of interest prohibitions that an EPA employee is subject to. We've seen breathtaking violations of that before with respect to mining companies. And I think that's an easy way to start. This is a site that far exceeds many that the Department of Interior are working on and doing natural resource damages assessments on, and holding these companies, mining companies especially, accountable for the damages to natural resources. I did know that there were lakes that are no more. You called them lost lakes. They are, they're there. They were there. Maybe they are there in some pitiful condition. I don't know how a court would decide, but I do know this. If you gave this same presentation to my tribal council, used to be a law, there was a law in place prohibiting riling up Indians. You would rile them up. You would rile them up. You'd violate that law. And maybe motivate KBIC to become a trustee along with possibly others, because trustees for natural resources can bring claims under CERCLA for damages. So there's a plethora of damages, but no natural resource damage assessment being conducted. If, then with respect to eagles, if those eagles abandon a nest, that's a take. I didn't hear you mention that they have a take permit. It sure sounds to me like they need a take permit to do the kinds of things they're proposing to do. And if the Fish and Wildlife Service isn't sitting there monitoring these activities, and I think there's primarily just like one state employee that works this, if that was my understanding,
Yeah.
then that they should be heavily involved in this project, given the fact that there's a risk to bald eagles. The other thing that I think that everybody should consider at UPEC is the cumulative effects of all of these mining activities that are underway and then have occurred in the past, and it's time to start lobbying these legislators. We have a new state legislator, Carl Bonak. He's just issued his first draft piece of legislation. Ed McBroom, I believe, is still at least on the Natural Resources Committee. I think he and Carl Bonak would be receptive to listening to some legislation that is needed in the state of Michigan. And if you take a two-prong approach, you're seeking EPA for withdrawing authority, and you're talking to legislators about legislation, that means you have their attention. And the legislation here really is simple. There's been enough historic mining in the United States of America to know this. Every piece of mine waste, every spoonful has a value. State of Michigan was considering providing $40 million to transport stamp sand to Stone Aggregate, who wants to put it to use. That hasn't happened. We're looking at the possibility of helping that initiative out economically by taking what little copper is present in stamp sands out of it. We've made some progress there. And I think Michigan needs to pass a law, cradle to grave, with mine waste. It's all worth money. And the best example that proves this is the tri-state mining district in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. And I watched that from 1999 to date. And I have a personal relationship with millionaires, and they became millionaires, 3 generations of one family in particular, 3 generations, with all 3 of the generations becoming millionaires exclusively on finding a use for mine waste. We've got a lot of mine waste in the UP, but we don't have as much as they had in the tri-state mining district. And just since 1999, when I became involved in it, up to today, half of what I saw in 99 is gone. They've made tremendous progress. This is an area half the size of UP, completely inundated with mine waste, massive amount. Nowhere, I think maybe in the world, was there more mine waste than the Tri-State Mining District. There's a Superfund site there, the Tar Creek Superfund site. They really didn't work it until they took blood from school children. They had high blood lead levels. ATSDR went, ballistic, forced the EPA to list the Tar Creek site and start addressing the pollution, especially lead exposure to children. But the chat operators, they call their mine tailings chat, the chat operators plugged along and have done more with respect to surface contamination than EPA's done probably in total when it involves mining across the United States of America. They found a use for it, an acceptable, safe use for it, and they put money in their pocket. So there's no reason these state legislators can say, oh, no, we can't force the industry to do that, to address that mine waste. And you could do it within 30 days if you had the processes in place to move that mine waste and use that mine waste. That's what I have to say.
Well, I appreciate your comments as always, Jeffrey. It's good to hear from you. I like the idea of putting them on notice on the petition to withdraw Clean Water Authority. I don't know anything about that process. If you have an example, a letter from
if
a
you
different place, that
Google,
would be awesome. Yeah.
if you just Google, I did it again. I've done it before. I had to remind myself. You just Google petitioning the Environmental Protection Agency to withdraw Clean Water Act authority from the state. Environmental advocacy organizations have done it. Nothing gets the attention of the state quicker than that petition. And I think there's actually been one example where EPA did withdraw the authority. That's a big thing, and it'll get attention. It'll get press. And I'm happy to say that when I found out that the mine tailing pile was the tallest point in Pure, Michigan, I don't know if that's still the case because they reshaped that. But when that made the papers, I made a practice of anywhere on social media that I would see the Pure Michigan campaign pop up, I would say the tallest point in Pure, Michigan is a toxic mine tailing pile. And they no longer have that campaign. So
yeah, it is the highest point, and it is going to get significantly higher under this proposed alternative, the preferred alternative. I did want to add, because I didn't have a screenshot of it, but they also indicated this is in their letter for correction request from the state to the company. Like 17 days ago, they said that there are cumulative impact concerns that were not addressed. The concerns were previously communicated by Eagle and the EPA. They said that there are cumulative impacts for stream mitigation. There are significant degradation, water quality secondary impacts that were not addressed. And it doesn't discuss the proposed discharges individually or cumulatively that may occur, relocate, or increase contamination to wetlands and watersheds around the proposed area. So those are positive things, right? I haven't seen those things being routinely mentioned in the correspondences between the mining companies and the state of Michigan before. So, but yeah, the petition to withdraw Clean Water Act Authority would definitely wake somebody up somewhere. That would give somebody a very bad morning, I think.
Well, they don't. Michigan does not have conflict of interest prohibitions equal to those that are that apply to an EPA employee. So people like Kristen Mariuza, Matt Johnson, that went straight from
Mhm.
being
Yep.
state employees straight to work for a mining company.
Yep.
You know, that's a pretty good example of a
Yeah.
recent example of what happens when you don't have those conflict of interest prohibitions. And I
Mhm.
think, you know, it's going to get their attention, and the legislators are much more open to talk to people that are getting attention.
So there's one other question here. Jeffrey Towner, is he still on the
I'm here, Kathleen.
Oh, hi, Jeffrey. Sorry, I didn't have my screen fully opened up. So you were asking about impacts to bald eagles and wolves. The
Well,
the
specifically, I was
company,
wondering what the Fish and Wildlife Service had to say about those species.
I haven't seen any response from Fish and Wildlife in the application, and we haven't seen their comments yet. But the letter that the company submitted was like a 2 or 3 page thing. No sooner did they actually confirm the location of the nest that we told them about last year with the bald eagle, than like they discovered that the company had done tree cutting in the area that went right up to inside the 660-foot buffer as well. So I mean, these poor eagles should get some sort of award. They've been moved by power companies. They're nesting successfully on the edge of a freaking stockpile. They have a company demolishing all the trees around them before they surveyed to confirm whether they're there or not. But I have not gotten any sense in the past that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had an alarmed reaction to it. I mean, I talked to them. I didn't see any result until the tribe started talking about it. So, I mean, I honestly have no idea. And the wolves thing, they just say that there's enough activity potential in the corridor that like there's travel corridors around the project area that's 25 square miles wide so that the wolves won't be impacted negatively. I mean, that's all they say. And that was based on last year's letter. So I haven't got any new information on it. Do you have any specific recommendations, Jeff?
Well, I would say, Jeffrey Lohman made a comment about in a case where that active bald eagle nest may be abandoned because
Yeah.
of the activity there. Even if it's not, placing tailings right, on top of the nest site, if a active bald eagle nest is abandoned,
Mhm.
or even if there's a reduction in nest productivity.
Mhm.
In other words, if a clutch fails to be raised, that's a violation of the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act.
Mhm.
So, legally they can't do that without a permit. So, a permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service. So,
Mhm.
I would think that the Fish and Wildlife Service should be weighing in on this.
Mhm.
I guess the other point that kind of struck me about the gray wolf issue is I don't know how an applicant can credibly say there are no wolves there. I don't know that you can say that about any place in the UP.
Well,
So
they said that there were no wolf dens present, but they also didn't do a large mammal survey. So, I mean, it's the lack of information is being interpreted by them as being a fact.
yeah, so I would hope that the Fish and Wildlife Service would be looking at this and weigh in at some point.
Mhm.
Um, then my other question is, in the event that Eagle goes forward, if the applicant, answers their questions to their satisfaction,
Mhm.
and they move forward and issue a permit that
Yeah.
does some of the things that that you're concerned about, do you have the option of taking legal action?
Well, Jeffrey is going to set me up with a millionaire who has ideas about mine waste and would like to sue on behalf of UPEC, I guess. I don't know. I mean, that's not where I personally, engage in best, but I'm sure it's always an option, right?
Yeah, I mean, um, legal action's expensive, of course, and you've got to have somebody who's willing to back that. But that's the last resort. Hopefully, it wouldn't
Yep.
come to that, but sometimes that's necessary.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. I I I think that the most egregious thing about, I mean, for those who were on last year's permit hearing on this, you had, permit reviewers from the state of Michigan who were sitting there telling us that no, 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 we were wrong. There were no eagles in the area because that's what the company had said. And then only later, admitting that all the photos of eagles that the adjacent landowner had taken were actually accurate. But then by the time they sent them out there, to document it, it was like a month after that, and they had freshly cut all the trees right around the eagle nest. So, I it's 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 partly a problem with their contractors too. Like the people that they're hiring are not um, local biologists. They're getting contractors from way out of state. So I think everything takes a little longer too. Um, I don't know what's going to happen with this go round. I do think that EPA and Fish and Wildlife Service had some very serious comments last time, but it was mostly the EPA's comments about cumulative impacts that the company was not able to address in time, especially the proposed alternatives. The serious issues with their feasibility of other feasible alternatives. They limited it too much. They didn't consider enough other options. Beyond that, I haven't considered where this might go. But at this point, it's been 3 years of them trying to get this particular permit to pass the state of Michigan. Last year, right after that public hearing that we all attended, with great turnout and amazing comments, the the reviewer for the state of Michigan left his job and moved to another state. So we have a brand new permit reviewer for this as well. So all bets are open in terms of what the decision will be, but thank you for your interest, everyone. I really appreciate it. And Mary has asked, how is it that these ghost lakes and ghost wetlands were allowed to be buried? And I'll just say, I think it just happens one permit at a time with not enough wonderful people like yourselves paying attention, right? It's one paper cut at a time that we bleed to death. That's the fact. And for way too long, I mean, approximately 175 years, Cleveland Cliffs has been getting absolutely everything it wants every single time. And I think that there is some sea change happening in terms of the concerns of Marquette County, and we'll take those concerns up as far as we have to get people to pay attention to it. So anyway, that's what I've got tonight. I hope you all join me again in February. We'll be talking about Eagle Mine and Revex and their new proposals. So, and Jeffrey, if you'd like me to speak to tribal council and get arrested for riling people up, just let me know. I'll be over there next week speaking for another group. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Thank you, Kathleen.
Have a wonderful night, and I appreciate you all.
Well,
Bye-bye.
thank you, Kathleen, and we'll have you on next month, February 20th, third Thursday, 7 p.m. And we'll be sending out a press release to let people know how to get into the program. So again, thank you so much. It's always a fantastic experience having you speak about mining. So Jeffrey, and I'm sorry, not Jeffrey, Evan, anything else you want to say before we head out?
Just wanted to thank Kathleen and everyone one more time and let you know that if you want to check this out after the fact, it's on our Facebook page, facebook.com/UP Environment. It's also on our YouTube channel. That's linked there too. And come back February 20th. See you then. Thank you.
Thank you, Horace. Thank you, Evan.
Yeah. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.